Here's a psychology fact most people are not ready for. Carl Jung spent decades studying human personality and concluded that less than 5% of the population ever develops what he called differentiated consciousness. Not intelligence, not talent. Consciousness. The rare ability to experience reality at a depth that most people never reach in their entire lives. And here's what makes this disturbing. Jung discovered that the people who possess this rare psychological architecture spend most of their lives being told something is wrong with them. Their intensity is called a problem, their sensitivity is called weakness, their refusal to accept shallow answers is called difficult. Society doesn't just fail to recognize rare personalities, it actively teaches them to suppress their most extraordinary traits. Psychologists call this psychological suppression. And once you understand what it costs you, you'll never see your so-called flaws the same way again. If even 4 of these 7 signs resonate with you, Jung would have recognized you as part of what I call the psychological elite, the rare individuals whose minds operate at a level most people never develop. But here's where it gets more complicated than you expect, because being psychologically rare isn't just a gift. It comes with specific patterns, specific shadows, and specific dangers that Jung identified and that almost nobody talks about. Sign 1. You feel emotions at a depth that frightens you. Jung discovered something that most modern therapists still miss. Certain individuals don't simply experience emotions. They experience what he called affect-toned complexes, layered psychological events that carry meaning, memory, and sensation simultaneously. You don't just feel sad. You feel the entire architecture of sadness, where it came from, what it connects to, what it's trying to tell you. Here's what Jung realized that changes everything. This isn't emotional instability, it's emotional intelligence operating at advanced levels. When you feel deeply, you're not overreacting. You're accessing what Jung called the objective psyche, layers of human experience that most people have learned to wall off entirely. But here's the part nobody wants to admit. This depth comes with a cost. You feel other people's pain before they've named it. You carry the emotional weight of rooms, relationships, and conversations that aren't yours to carry. Jung warned that without boundaries, this gift becomes what I call emotional absorption syndrome. You become an unconscious container for everyone else's unprocessed feelings. The work isn't to feel less. The work is to feel with discernment. Sign 2. You can't stop questioning things everyone else accepts. Most people live what Jung called unconscious lives. They absorb social programming, follow inherited scripts, and never once ask who wrote the rules they're following. You can't do this. Your mind won't allow it. Here's the painful psychology truth behind this. Your brain is wired for what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological compulsion to see beyond current limitations. While others accept the way things are, your mind is already interrogating why things are this way and imagining what they could become. But here's where it gets darker. Your questions don't just make people uncomfortable, they threaten something. When you ask deep questions, you're not just seeking answers. You're exposing the psychological defenses that keep people feeling safe inside their limitations. This is why you've been told you think too much. It's not that your thinking is excessive. It's that your thinking is dangerous to people who have built their comfort on unexamined assumptions. Jung called these people unconsciously threatened. You've spent your whole life being punished by their discomfort. Sign 3. You've outgrown people, and it's happened more than once. Jung said, the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. But what happens when you refuse to live an unlived life? You grow. And growth, Jung discovered, is often a solitary process. You've experienced this. The friends who knew you when you were smaller, quieter, more willing to shrink, they remember that version of you. Sometimes they want it back. Not because they miss you, but because the person you were then made them feel safe. Your growth exposes their stagnation without you saying a single word. Here's the truth you've been avoiding. This pattern isn't going to stop. Jung understood that psychological evolution is irreversible. Once you've seen through a layer of conditioning, you cannot unsee it. Once you've expanded, you cannot shrink back to fit spaces that no longer hold you. The loneliness you feel when you outgrow people isn't failure. It's what Jung called the price of individuation, the unavoidable cost of becoming who you actually are. Sign 4. You possess what I call hyper-perceptive awareness. Jung revolutionized psychology when he identified intuition as a legitimate cognitive function. Not a feeling, not a guess, but a form of perception that operates through the unconscious. He defined it as perception via the unconscious that brings forth ideas, images, and possibilities through a process most people never consciously access. You read people before they speak. You notice the micro-expression that contradicts the words. You feel the tension in a room that everyone else pretends isn't there. When someone says they're fine, you already know exactly how not fine they are. Here's the harsh psychology of this gift. Your nervous system is processing information at a speed and depth that creates a specific kind of exhaustion. Jung identified what I call perceptual overload as one of the defining challenges of rare personalities. You're not anxious without reason. You're picking up signals that most people's systems filter out entirely. The problem isn't your sensitivity. The problem is that you've been living in environments designed for people who feel far less than you do. Sign 5. Shallow connection feels physically unbearable to you. Here's a psychology fact that will reframe your entire social history. Jung discovered that certain personalities are psychologically incapable of sustained inauthenticity. Not unwilling, incapable. Your nervous system registers shallow interaction the same way other nervous systems register pain. You've tried small talk. You've tried surface-level socializing. You've performed the rituals of casual connection, but Jung would have recognized what you felt underneath immediately. That hollow sensation, that quiet sense of betraying something essential, that exhaustion that has nothing to do with how long you stayed at the party. But here's what I've discovered about people with this trait. They don't have a social problem. They have a depth requirement that most social environments are not built to meet. Jung called this the craving for authentic encounter, and he identified it as one of the most reliable signs of what he called a differentiated psychological structure. You're not antisocial. You're incompatible with pretending. Sign 6. You have a persistent sense of purpose you can't fully explain. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens?" You feel something, a restless, persistent knowing that you are meant to contribute something specific to the world. You can't always name it. You can't always see the shape of it, but its absence feels like a kind of slow suffocation. Here's the dark truth Jung identified about this trait. When people with a strong sense of undefined purpose ignore it, they don't just feel unfulfilled. They develop what Jung called neurotic symptoms. Anxiety that has no object. Depression that has no cause. A creeping meaninglessness that no achievement, relationship, or distraction can touch. Because the symptom isn't psychological dysfunction. It's your psyche staging a protest against a life lived below your actual capacity. If that hit you, good. It means you needed it. Sign 7. You experience what I call transformational solitude. Most people treat solitude as something to escape. They fill silence with noise, screens, and social obligations because an empty room forces a confrontation they're not equipped to survive. You're different. You don't just tolerate solitude, you require it. Not as avoidance, as restoration. Jung called this the capacity for individuation in silence, the rare ability to use aloneness as a psychological laboratory rather than a punishment. In your solitude, you don't disappear. You return to yourself. You process, integrate, and understand things that the noise of constant social demand would never allow you to reach. But here's what Jung warned about this gift. The danger isn't solitude itself. The danger is using solitude as a defense against intimacy. Jung identified what I call the sanctuary trap, the pattern where rare personalities retreat so effectively into their inner world that they stop building the outer one. The goal isn't to choose between depth and connection. The goal is to become someone who can carry your inner world into genuine relationship with others. Here's what Jung understood that modern psychology is only beginning to acknowledge. These 7 signs aren't individual quirks. They're evidence of what I call advanced psychological architecture, a way of experiencing reality that most people never develop. Your emotional depth isn't oversensitivity. It's intelligence operating below the surface. Your relentless questioning isn't negativity. It's consciousness refusing to accept limitations as permanent. Your pattern of outgrowing people isn't coldness. It's evolution that cannot be stopped. Your hyper-perceptive awareness isn't anxiety. It's perception functioning exactly as it was designed to. Your need for authentic connection isn't antisocial. It's your psyche protecting itself from psychological starvation. Your undefined purpose isn't confusion. It's potential that hasn't found its full form yet. And your transformational solitude isn't isolation. It's where you do the work that most people are never willing to do. Jung spent his entire career studying people like you because he understood something that took him decades to fully articulate. You're not too much for the world. The world hasn't yet developed the capacity to fully receive you. But here's the responsibility that comes with this. Jung warned that rare personalities face a specific shadow danger he called psychological inflation. The moment you begin to see your rarity as superiority rather than responsibility, your greatest gifts start working against you. The work isn't to be extraordinary for yourself. The work is to use what you are in service of something larger than your own validation. Your sensitivity is not weakness to be managed. It's intelligence to be applied. Your intensity isn't something to apologize for. It's exactly what certain moments require. And your refusal to settle isn't difficult. It's necessary. Carl Jung believed that individuals like you serve as what I call bridges between what humanity is and what humanity could become. Your questions push consciousness forward. Your depth gives others permission to stop pretending. Your presence in a room changes what's possible in that room. The world doesn't need you smaller. It needs you fully awake to exactly what you are. If these signs resonated, share this with someone who has spent too long being told they're too much. Subscribe, because we're just getting started.